The bill came for £15,000. I took the exact same instruction, press enter, within 2.5 minutes. It gave me a response exactly the same that one I got from the law firm. It was not 15,000, I can promise you that. We ended up agreeing to in the end.
Legal is generally known as the department that slows things down. The gatekeepers, the people who paid to worry about the risk. But today's guest is doing the opposite. He's declared June as an AI adoption month for his own legal team. He's building agents, he's talking about MCP connectors, to the point where even his own CTO asked him, like, are you sure you're a lawyer? Please welcome Xavier Langlois.
We've done more in the past 10 days than we've had in the past 3 months. People still think of AI in many ways as ChatGPT. That is not AI. I don't think my vibe coding skills were enough to build something that the business could then use and run with. The law firm wanted to charge me £50,000 to review, I think there was over 100 contracts. We got the report done in 20 minutes and the accuracy was well over 98%. As much as these tools can do a lot of things, what they can't do is be human. Even just yesterday, I was on 3 different screens running 3 different agents to do 3 different things. I will not replace lawyers, but it will replace lawyers that do not use AI.
You talk to people in Anthropic and they used to tell you like, oh dude, we feel like we're behind, we should be moving faster. And it can't be true for us to all be behind. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The AI Floor, where we uncover the AI adoption across industries. So please welcome to the studio, Xavier Langlois.
Hello, hi Shamil, thank you for having me. Yeah, very excited to be on today, and I think there'll be hopefully a lot of topics that we can cover.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be really fun. With the amount of expertise, I think all of the listeners are going to benefit tremendously from listening to your stories and your approach to AI adoption. Like even for me, it's going to be really exciting to hear about all of that. Can we start with you telling a little bit to our listeners who are listening at home on their commute, a bit about yourself, what you do, your background, and then talk about the AI adoption month that you've introduced to your department?
Yeah, of course. So, as you said, I'm Xavier. Everybody calls me X. I'm General Counsel for OneAdvanced. We're a UK headquartered SaaS company. We serve 7 critical sectors in the UK, everything from education to health to housing to government to transport, logistics, etc. We have about 9,000 customers. And I run the legal risk resilience and compliance team of about 30 people. I joined about 18 months ago now. And have been going on a journey of how do we better leverage tech to deliver the services that we deliver to our business, with the commitment, I guess, to the business that headcount shouldn't go up as a proportion. Because ultimately, I think historically the model has been for legal teams, every lawyer should do X amount of matters. So that, the default was always let's throw body at scale, as opposed to, well, let's really leverage technology in order to scale with the business and to accelerate scale, because ultimately we're here to serve the business. So that's what I've been embarking on in the past 18 months or so.
Awesome. Obviously, you're working for a tech company and you work with like private equity. You've interacted with a lot of like technology within the previous companies that you worked with. So maybe that is kind of helping get your head straight into the technological innovation age that we've stumbled upon as a humanity. And the way that you approach that on the conversation you told me before, that you're trying to embrace the technology among everyone who's working for you in your department, and you've introduced the notion of let's do an AI adoption month. Can you talk about like what was the thinking behind that, and how did you structure this process?
Yeah, 100%. So I think on the tech side, and maybe I should have shared this in the introduction, but I've always worked in-house for tech businesses. So I qualified as a lawyer in a law firm, but even when I was doing my qualification, I spent most of my training at businesses. I spent time at Amazon, I spent time at Getty Images, MTV. So I knew that I always wanted to work for a tech business. And I've done that since I've qualified, which is a few years now. And then I did a stint in private equity as well, who invested in tech companies. So I think from very earlier on, I've always been fascinated by yeah, how the interrelation between tech people and business and
Yeah.
how they all come together. So yeah, I'm a bit of a geek. So yeah, tech. I try to be as techy as I can. But yeah, I think if it's been around you your whole career, you sort of by osmosis you tend to learn that way. So yeah, so that's sort of from the tech perspective. But yeah, so what I wanted to do this month is, we are super lucky at OneAdvanced that we have a lot of tools available to us. And as a team, we're invested in a specific tool last year, which is an AI tool that was built for lawyers by lawyers, which is always helpful as opposed to a lot of these generic sort of
Hmm.
AI tools out there. And their technology has evolved immensely in the past 3 to 6 months, like every tech company. And we got to the point where I said to myself, okay, my team has this tool available to them. Yes, they're using it for some what I would call, I don't want to use the word basic, but for some very standard AI usage. But how can we really take it to the next level? How can we leverage MCP connectors? How can we leverage the ability to build our own agents? How can we leverage the ability to build workflows, skills, and everything else that's available? So, in order to sort of kickstart it, I self-declared June to be our AI adoption month. And you could say enablement, adoption. Yeah, I think there's a numbers of ways that we can call it. But what we've done is a couple of things. So we started the month by having this vendor come to our offices for 2 days. So we ran a bit of a legathon, trying to be cool as lawyers, steal it from IT, from our tech friends. So we did a legathon for 2 days where we got everybody in a room, or most of the team in the room, and said, right, what do we want to achieve? What is the problem statement that we're trying to solve for? Where are the areas where at the moment the business is relying on us 100%? Where are the things that we're doing that are super manual? How can we take that off our desk? How can we build self-serve to allow the business to, you know, do what they need to do without always having to rely on us? Because sometimes we're on holiday, sometimes it's the weekend, but why can't they still get their contracts out to their customers and sign deals? Why do they need us all the time? So we really
Yeah.
sort of broke it down to what are the jobs to be done that we wanted to use tech to solve for. And fast forward 10 days now. I think it's been about 10 days since we had that legathon. The team have built, I think, have built and written a combined number of over 15 agents and skills to solve those jobs to be done.
Mhm.
All of them are still in testing. One of them is live, so we're getting feedback from one of our internal teams, and I can obviously give a bit more detail on some of the use cases. But yeah, so it's been super, super exciting. I mean, we've done more in the past 10 days than we had in the past 3 months, but I think that's because I think the tech is there. I think also people now realize that it's going to be part of our day to day. And I think myself as a manager, as a leader, we're not just investing in our team skills today, but also skills they can take with them in their next jobs. And to me, that's super,
Mhm.
super important. So I actually had to agree a pack with my team, which is to say, hey, we're going to invest in this. We're going to invest in you, but you need to, give the time back to invest in yourself and in what we're doing. So everybody said that we had a deal. And yeah, so that's how we kicked off AI Adoption Month.
Nice. And how'd you go about? Basically, obviously, there's like over the last 2 months, I think the two large players in legal tech, the Harvey, the Legora. Like, how do you make the decision between like, okay, we're gonna use the largest platforms for ourselves to kind of, or maybe we can build something ourselves because the models are there. You put the guardrails, the models are improving. Maybe we just build the skills that just solve like specific problems that we had, as opposed to like investing a huge per seat model to like one of the big guys.
Oh, good question. I think there's a couple of things in my mind, which is without using the we are lawyers as a card, we're not inherently technical. And I think
Yeah.
to build something ourselves, we would need the business to invest in time, either by borrowing some of our engineers who could have been spending this time on building stuff for our own customers, or from our IT team, or bringing in a third party. So I think by the time you've done all of that, in my mind, it was quicker to to down select a number of external players to the one that we think worked best for us. And even that was hard, right? Because as you said, there's these two big players, but there's also a long list of 10, 20, 30 other
Contenders.
players, yeah, that all want, a share of the pie. So even that was hard. So yes, you
Mhm.
could say maybe it would be easier for you to build it internally. I think if we had the skill set in the team, 100%, I don't think my vibe coding skills were enough to build something that the business could then use and run with, especially as you think about all the connectors, the integrations,
Yeah.
getting past our security team, our IT team. I think for a business our size, that is a lot harder. But
Mhm.
yeah, why not? Maybe some scale up companies, if they have the ability to do that, I think that would be great. I mean, I've always said that, yeah, if I had the skill set, I would definitely build a legal tool from A to Z. But I think for now, I'll stick to being a customer.
And can you tell us, like, maybe that's going to save a lot of time for anyone listening who, is within their own legal departments and are like, okay, cloud technology is coming out. There are all these like 30, 40 companies providing the services. Like, where do I start? Like, in your experience, you've got a lot of agents right now, like 15 agents, one in production, kind of others in testing. What things have you found like, okay, the AI doesn't really fit well within those particular like use cases? And these use cases, they're the ones that like the simple and very effective for any company to start with, like from the get-go.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to use the words you said at the beginning, which is, my job and our job as legal teams is to think about risk and to
Mhm.
protect risk, the risk of the business. So we sort of used that when we thought about, right, what are the jobs to be done that are low risk,
Mhm.
where we wouldn't have, we would be super comfortable with an agent doing that job on our behalf. But I think the key thing is never forgetting that there should always be a human in the loop, especially as you start. Like, for example, yes, we've got these 15 agents, and yes, we're rolling them out or we're testing them. But I foresee that for the first 3 to 6 months of these agents being live, as part of the workflow, there will be a human in the loop at some point, because
Mhm.
obviously we want to keep iterating, testing what these tools can do and the output of those tools. And in my mind, it's no different than having a lawyer in training, like a
Mhm.
trainee lawyer working for you. So the more you invest into it, in terms of teaching it how you want things to work, how you want the output to look like, what to do, what not to do. I think the more you invest in it, the more you will get out of it. I think, people still think of AI in many ways as ChatGPT. That is not AI, right?
Yeah.
And asking a tool like that to compare two documents, I don't think is the best use of AI. I think for me, it's when you really think about what are these jobs that you as a team, as a department have to do that is very manual in nature, very repetitive in nature, very low risk in nature. How do you automate that? Because ultimately, that's how you can scale as a team, and that's how you can get your team to focus on things that are more high value by stopping to do those low value things. And I think the other challenge I found is people want to tackle everything at once and think that the AI is solution to everything. And it's not. The AI legal tool set might be part of the solution. In some cases, it might not be the solution at all. But I think because there's so much hype about it, I think people think, oh, I'll just throw an AI tool and it'll solve all my problems. And it's like, no, I think you have to really break it down to what are the jobs that you're trying to do? What is the output that you're trying to achieve? Is AI the best answer to this? Because it might not be. There's some things that, when we did our jobs to be done, where AI was
Yeah.
100% not the answer. So I think it's really going through and breaking down the tasks, looking at how risky it is on that sort of profile, and then starting with those, and then building up how comfortable you are with those tools. So yeah, that's what I would share. But I think everybody's experience with this is potentially different. But that's definitely what we did, and so far has worked for us. We've learned a lot along the way. We're nowhere near done learning. But yeah, it's been exciting.
Like for me personally, when I evaluate like various departments and people like leading those departments within across all of the industries, it's sort of like my logic tends to the point that everybody will have to become sort of as a product owner for their department,
Mm.
like thinking about technologies as well. And a lot of people are just, starting on their path to like, oh, well, and I have to understand what an MCP is. Like,
Mhm.
what is agentic AI? Like, what kind of tools are there? From somebody who's actually walked the path, from somebody who started with law and then kind of got his head around all of these technologies. If you had somebody in front of you, who has their own department and they were tasked from the C-level executives, so maybe they have a passion for, I want to start with something. What would be the correct kind of approach to learning of AI?
Good question. I think it's just being open to learning for one. And also, there's a lot of material out there. So I think the other challenge is, well, what are the good materials? And I
Hmm.
think often the answer is in front of you. Again, for those of you that, or for those, people in this situation that work in tech businesses, your engineering teams, your product teams, or, have all of this knowledge. I got taught what an MCP is a few months ago by our chief product officer because we were having a conversation. He kept using the acronym, and I was like, what is an MCP? And then, then you take that information and then you go and do your own research and your own learning. So I think it's, and again, starting from the beginning and not trying to learn everything all at once. And I think the best thing that has worked for me is putting it into practice as well,
Hmm.
because there's the theory of what is AI, there's the theory of what is an MCP, etc., etc. But I think until you use it, until you see it in action, I think, if I think of all the learning that I've done around the topic, I would say 80% or more has been learning by doing, because you then get to see it, see it in action. You get to see what works, what doesn't work, trial and error. So that's what's worked for me. But there's a lot of great content out there. I think attending conferences is also a great way. I think listening to podcasts is also a great way. I think there's a lot of great information, and sometimes there's too much information.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would start with the people around you, your teams. I think what I've realized is there's a lot of great pockets of knowledge in your own teams that you're sometimes not aware of, because people are curious by nature. You might have people on your teams that are already doing this in their pastime, already doing their own research, already testing things on their own, Claude account or, ChatGPT account or whatever it is. So yeah, maybe tap into that knowledge to start with and then grow and build from there. Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
And in terms of like practical, like getting your hands dirty in the technology, like what kind of set of tools would you advise them? Because there are just so many things that you can do in practice. Like maybe like the easiest ones, go with like Claude and just ask it like, let's
Yeah.
create a skill. That, or maybe there are some other like things that you would advise people to try in terms of like practice.
So I'll never forget this. So we have a director of knowledge management, and she did a review of our IT estate as a company.
Hmm.
And I think, this is no different to a lot of companies, which is, I think a lot of companies only use, the figure was shocking, but it was like 20-30% of the capabilities of their current tools. And what I mean by that is, if people are either Office 365 users or G Suite users, a lot of them already have embedded tools that are AI native. You
Yeah.
don't need to go and purchase a tool. Again, often the answer is right in front of you. And I know that, not every business has turned on Copilot as an example,
Hmm.
but there is still AI built-in functionality within a lot of these tools today, which could be a great starting point to sort of play around with. And then I think if you then, determine that you want to really take the next step, I think what a lot of providers are doing today, or if they're not, you should ask them, is doing some proof of concepts or doing some, trial months. So you could ask
Yeah.
them to get a trial for a couple of months, where you can properly test it and also use your data. Because I think sometimes, these environments that are real sort of dummy environments, if it's not with your data, you won't get as much out of it. So I would, encourage people to ask vendors to set up a full production environment that you can test for a month, 2 months, however long it takes. I mean, that's what we did before we made the decision to go with Wordsmith, who's our current vendor. We did I think it was a 3 month trial to really see how the team were responding to it, what it could do for us. So I think I would do, and if you do that, you can then test a few of them as well and compare, because again, everybody will sell you the dream and
Yeah.
everybody will sell you all the amazing things that it can do. But I think until you've actually tested it, tried it, and also put it in front of your IT team to think about, well, how can I integrate it with the rest of the business tech stack? I think it's really getting down to that level of detail, but you can't really do that if you don't have access to the tool. So I think depending on where people are at, I would say look at your current tool set that you already have access to and try and leverage those. And then if you do want to take it a step further, then 100% ask these vendors for trial access.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good life hack to know. Also, if you look in the industry, what AI companies have done over the past year or two, in order to drive their own share value, they went after the biggest economic value. They were like, okay, we can cut down your labor by, you can use AI instead of all of your employees, which resulted in a kind of fascinating way of alienating all of the people from trying all of those tools. Because obviously, if that's something that could replace me, why would I kind of add to that? How do you go about changing people's perception of what AI is? How it is just a very good tool instead of something that is conscious and is going to run the company in 5 years.
That is a big question because you're throwing in some ethical considerations, you're throwing in cultural considerations, economic, and I'm not an expert of all of these things, but I can definitely share with you my perspective. I truly do not think, and I might be wrong, history might correct me, but I really do not think that AI will displace jobs in the way that is being described in the press. I think it will at some point, if an employer has to make a choice between an employee that has mastered AI skills versus someone that hasn't, you can't blame that employer if in time they pick the person that has mastered those skills, because that skill set, in my mind, will be required for every job. And I think that's where, if people that will be left behind, in my mind, are people that are potentially not opening themselves to upskilling, to learning, to developing, to investing in what this will look like. I've made it very clear to my team, and our CEO shares his views, my views, our views, that it won't displace jobs in the way that people think it will. Will it make processes more efficient? Of course. Will it allow more with less? Of course. But that might not always result in job losses, because the people whose jobs may be impacted, there's an opportunity there for them to reskill and to look at different jobs or to do different things. And I know that's easier said than done, but I think that's why it's a shared responsibility, right? I think there's a lot of sort of finger pointing towards tech providers and employers, but I think we all of us, me included, we need to look inwards as well, which is, what are we doing to stay on top of it? How are we upskilling ourselves? How are we learning in order to stay relevant? And I read this a while ago. There was a sentence that stayed with me that said, AI will not replace lawyers, but it will replace lawyers that do not use AI. And that stuck with me because I think that's very true, right? And you could argue, well, that's the same that when emails came out in the 90s, it's the same when the internet came out. This is just the next big shift in technology that I think one of the biggest ones we will see in my lifetime, I think. So I think we all forget what the transition looked like before. And obviously now there's a lot more hype and social media and everything else, but it's no different. It's a reskilling opportunity. It's a opportunity for people to maybe do different things and do them in a different way. I mean, personally, I know I save between 4 to 8 hours a week by using some of the tools that I use in order to help me do my job. That's a whole day's worth of work. So I'm now able to be more productive by working the same and sometimes less. So my job is not, you know what I mean? Like, and same for my team, right? They're now showing signs of being able to save as much time a day, but their jobs are not at risk. If anything, they can now do other things, more things, do things differently. So there might have been some contradictions in what I've said today, but I think overall, hopefully, the sentiment is there.
I think the kind of question that I have in my head here and that is like, okay, let's say that we have a 30 people team. Everybody starts using AI. Like any future kind of work we can use within our capacity. We can, we're more efficient. We can take on more work. It's fine. What happens to, for example, all of these students, right? I'm, for example, a legal student. I'm in university right now. Industry's changed. Like what are my chances? Like if the junior's job, like for research and everything, is being done by all of the software, what should I be thinking about to make sure that I still have a place among those companies that don't really need to hire more people because they can now do more work with the same number of people?
I love that you've raised this because it's something that I'm super passionate about, which is, the responsibility that I think all of us have in helping the next generation, is, well, in my case, generation of legal practitioners, etc. And there's been a couple of things written about this, which is if, to your point, these tools might replace a lot of the entry-level work, how do you then get the entry-level people to train and be better at what they do so they can sort of, I don't like the analogy, but sort of move up in experience and, etc. And I don't think there is a clear answer right now. And I think, if I were to have an ask is, for the universities, for the law firms, for all of these groups to, think about what does that look like? Because what I think will happen is, and this is just my point of view, is you're going to have people that have done their, let's keep using a lawyer as an example, but who's done their law exams, who's now ready to work. And to your point, there will potentially be less jobs, but also there will be an expectation that they can come into the job and do a lot of these things because they're going to be assisted by a tool. So then the question is, well, what skill set do they need to have in order to thrive, in order to be different? And in my mind, it's the uniquely human skills. Because as much as these tools can do a lot of things, what they can't do is be human. So I think, skills like critical thinking, skills like emotional intelligence, communication skills, which, you could argue are sort of basic human skills. I think those are the ones that in the future, or even now, there'll be a bigger sort of focus on. It's definitely something that I am doing with my team in terms of really thinking about, okay, if you can now have a contract drafted in 2 minutes, as opposed to you a few years ago taking half a day to do it yourself, what do you do with that output? What is the critical thinking you need to apply? What is the commercial thinking you need to apply in order to maximize the time that you now have got back because the output was handed to you in 2 minutes? So what does that look like? And we're really at the moment thinking about how do we over focus on those inherently and uniquely human skills? Because I think that's what will differentiate candidates in the market. But also, I think that will be the expectation because, again, the output will be able to be done by a tool in a couple of minutes, but you will need to be able to supervise those tools. You'll need to be able to analyze the output. So, that analytical, critical thinking, I think, is what will be key going forward. And the only way for people to get that experience, I think, is in the doing more than anything else, because you can't read books about critical thinking. I mean, you can, but you need to to do it. So I think finding those opportunities for anyone coming into the career is, I think, will be the biggest challenge, is to find those opportunities where they can showcase their human skills, where they can learn on the job.
You've mentioned that, like, drafting a contract before used to take 2 minutes now, or used to take 5 hours. Now it can be done in like 2 minutes. And, within my profession as well, like running a company, like sometimes I like to vibe code a solution, for example, is to use internally. And like before I had time to think through, to sleep on it, to come back. Now when things are almost instantaneous, I feel constantly exhausted with the amount of like summer, like if previously your leadership expected you to do like 2 contracts a day, right? And now they're like, well, now you can do 20. Yes, physically you can draft, 20 contracts, but the amount of critical thinking and saving things in your head, your neural connections are not adapted to be able to take as much information. Have you noticed like any of this exhaustion or fatigue with the decisions that you constantly have to make, because they almost happen, like all of the work happens instantaneously instead of giving you time to kind of process all of that?
100%. I mean, I think the cognitive load and the context switching has never been more intense than it is already in this day and age. But then if you add, to your point, tools that can do things in half a second,
Yeah.
it's exhausting. I mean, even just yesterday, I was on three different screens running 3 different agents to do 3 different things. And those 3 things were completely different. One was about employment, the other one was corporate, the other one was commercial. At one point, I had to like stop myself and be like, "What am I doing?" Because then you have to ask yourself, "Are you giving, your best attention to the things that you're doing?" Because before, people knew that if you had to again review a contract, it would take you 3 hours, so they'd leave you alone, or even you would allocate that to yourself. But now you're like, no, of course I can do this in 5 minutes. But then it's like 5 minutes of this, 5 minutes of that, and before you know it, you've spent 3 hours looking at 20 things, and then you're like, can I have a break now? So yeah, I fully agree with you. The cognitive load on our bodies, on us, and the context switching is super, super, super intense. If anyone has any tips on how to deal with that, I would be super open. Maybe you have some tips, Shamil. I don't know, but yeah, I'm struggling with that right now.
Nothing right now from me. Like I'm saying, I'm the kind of person to spend time vibe coding until 3 a.m. because there is just the next thing you want to because the next progression is not 3 hours. It's 10 minutes away. You're like, I'll just do it the next, and then you're like, oh, it's 3 a.m. I need to go to sleep,
All of us are getting these instant dopamine hits because the gratification is coming so quickly.
Yeah.
You type a command or prompt and you get it instantly back. Whereas before, again, it used to take an hour, 2 hours, but now the gratification is instant. So you're constantly in that dopamine. But yeah, so I totally get where you're coming from. But yeah, definitely something that we're all going to have to learn to manage for sure.
Almost feels like, that's the new kind of Instagram or TikTok. And it's good, for example, with Claude, they have the limits. So whenever you hit your limit, you're like, okay, I have an hour. What do I do now?
Well, it's a bit
Maybe I should go outside.
It's a bit like if parents confiscating the phones of their kids,
Exactly.
right? You're like, what is my life now?
And let's also touch the point of we have legal companies or legal team within companies, and we have the outside counsel as well, right? And the outside counsel, because there is sort of like an outsourcing firm where, you come with your issues. They're like, we have experts. They give you the experts to do some research, like 6 minutes increments, always like old model that used to work for a very long time. What is your perception of like, how is it already changing? How do like those old models of billing are working for you? And what do you foresee in like your ideal kind of type of interaction between internal legal companies and the firms?
Yeah, what a great topic, and there's so many things that you have mentioned there that I think could be worth clicking on. But I'll take your direction, of course. But I think and I'm not the only one to think like this. So I know this is true for many people in my position who do instruct external law firms on a daily basis, which is that it has to move to a value-based outcome pricing. I'll give you a small example that happened to me a few months ago. So I instructed a law firm to do a piece of work on a specific question, a piece of legislation. They did their work, they came back to me and responded in an email that was probably this long. The bill came for £15,000. So when you look at the bill, they spent 90% of that time doing legal research. And they used, they didn't use a cheap sort of person to do that. They used one of their sort of, good lawyers to do it. So receiving this is never great because, again, especially when you see the outcome is half a page, that in my head that doesn't correlate. And I know there might be a lot of people listening to this being very upset by what I'm saying, especially if they work in law firms. But just stay with me for a second. So what I then did is I took the exact same instructions that I gave that law firm. I put it in the tool that we use and I press enter. Within, let's say, 2.5 minutes, it had done its work, it had done its legal analysis, done its research, and it gave me a response, I kid you not, is exactly the same that one I got from the law firm. I'm not saying that the law firm used AI and they overcharged me for legal research when they didn't. I think they genuinely spent time doing the research, but I got the answer that I wanted within 2 minutes. So I challenged them because, I run a P&L, I run a business, I'm conscious of costs. And, their response was interesting, was to say, well, if you had told us that you wanted us to use an AI approach, the bill could have been different, but you didn't. But let's agree on a price that makes sense to you. And then, they asked the question, which is, what is this advice worth to you? So I went back with a response and, we then had agreement on what the bill looked like. It was not 15,000, I can promise you that. It was a lot less. I think it was £2,000 that we ended up agreeing to in the end. So that's one example. But I think that illustrates a much bigger challenge, which is law firms are inherently built around the 6-minute increment. Everything that they do, how they recruit people, how they pay people, how they record everything. So, we as in-house lawyers, and I think that some part of the industry are basically asking law firms to redesign themselves. And I don't think that's going to be an easy job because the whole structure is built around that. And I think that's why we're seeing, some of these new AI native law firms coming up that are outcome based, are value based. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays in practice. Because for me, I will always need to go to an external law firm, but I might go to them for different things now. I might, use the tools that I have available to do 80, 90% of what I want it to do, and then go to them for their expertise on that final 5, 10, 15%. Because what you're paying in the end is for the expertise now, I think, and it's for, because they have a unique position where they see 100 matters a day. So you're asking them to apply that commercial knowledge that they have to your problem. And I think, well, when it comes to me, that's what I want to pay going forward. I don't want to pay for drafting. I don't want to pay for legal research. I don't want to pay for bundling PDFs together. I mean, you can literally do this at a click of a button now in half a second. So yeah, it will be a very interesting space to watch. And, there's some in-house teams really taking that to a different level. So I don't know if you followed the recent article by Tom, the General Counsel at Revolut. So they've just built a new panel of their new panel of external law firms will be based on sort of value outcome driven, because historically you'd have a panel and you'd invite law firms and you would use them based on fee agreements, etc. Whereas what he's doing is inviting law firms to the panel, but they will review them every 3 to 6 months. They will look at productivity. They will look at the output. They will look at the value they've given. All of these metrics that, I think you would expect these days, right, from any third party. So you're already seeing some of these things happening, but I think it will take some of the bigger players. When I mean bigger players is, like your banks and etc., who are the most of the revenue of law firms, to demand this. before it really, I think, trickles through. But yes, I despise the 6 minute increment bill.
Interesting. And if we talk about the 5-10%, that is still going to be interesting in terms of like what you want to rely on. So it could be like you doing all of that research, coming up with that like short form of text, and then giving it to them. It's like, can you confirm that that
Correct. Yeah.
works?
Is my analysis correct? Do you have any additional thoughts? Is there anything that you've seen in the market for the past 3, 6 months that might change my analysis or my interpretation? So I think for one-off things that works. I mean, of course, for bigger M&A transactions and stuff, you're always going to need external counsel to help run them. But then I think what all of us need to do is question and query and challenge how are they running them? For example, I don't want to be paying £500,000 anymore, if you are talking of big
Yeah.
acquisitions, to do due diligence. I had the same thing last year. We acquired two companies at OneAdvanced. For one of them, a law firm wanted to charge me £50,000 to review. I think there was over 100 contracts, and I said no. I said, I don't want you to use people to do it. Use a tool. And we ended up using Wordsmith that we use. We got the report done in 20 minutes and then they validated the output. And to be honest, I validated the output myself and the accuracy was well over 98%. So, in some areas it's scoring higher than humans when it comes to accuracy. So I think it's on us as recipients of those services to challenge the firms and say, hey, how are you if I'm giving you a matter, how are you scoping it? How are you staffing it? How are you using AI to get to the outcome? So I think that's when you can start having those conversations around
Mhm.
value-based pricing and yeah.
So do you think that the future for, let's say, legal procurement for like large companies would be something like you would have a panel of 10 potential companies that you want to work with, and then you just submit tenders as like, we have this job. We perceive the value to be somewhere around £5,000. What can you offer? Like, who is ready to take the responsibility and how much are you ready to pay to hold that responsibility for this particular thing?
Yeah, I don't think that's impossible. I do think though that in this industry it's a lot about the human sort of relationship as well. So a lot
Mhm.
of us will use people that we've used before, regardless at what firm they sort of worked at, because you've got a trust element, you've got a. But yeah, I mean, I have, and I'm doing this today. I have zero issue going to one or two law firms and saying, "Hey, I've got this piece of work. This is what it's worth to me and to my business. This is what
Mhm.
I think, or what I'm ready to pay. Are you able to deliver on that?" And sometimes I've had a yes, sometimes I've had a no, sometimes I've had people come back and say, I can't do this, but I can do that amount because, and then they explain why, right? Because maybe I didn't appreciate the work that will need to go into it as well, right?
Mhm.
So it has to be a two-way conversation. So yes, I think the way that we procure legal services will definitely change going forward. I mean, it has to, because this model has been around for, I don't know how long, 100 years.
Yeah.
So it has to change. It's still one of those very archaic systems. And you can see it now with, some of the big fours. You can see it with some of your consulting firms. The way that they are charging and pricing their services is changing. So yeah, I think lawyers or law firms might be the last one to fully change.
Mm. It is exciting to kind of, and anxious at the same time to see how much the industry is changing.
But also
And
for me,
how,
it's super exciting to see. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's super exciting to see how much, I'm going to use the word hype, but how much activity there is in the legal tech market. Because you might, again, we started this conversation by you saying, yeah, lawyers look after risk, sometimes a bit more conservative. But actually, when you look at a lot of the PE firms, a lot of the tech companies out there, there seems to be a disproportionate amount in legal tech. And it's really a market that's really booming in the past, well, definitely in the past year, but also in the past couple of years, which I think, again, is a paradox in itself when you think about who the recipients of those services are. But yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity for in-house legal teams, lawyers, for legal tech. Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity.
and what do you feel like we are in the overall kind of adoption curve as as industry, let's say?
As a legal industry or as in-house legal teams?
Let's say it's in-house legal teams as compared to all of the like hype that is out there, and as to like realities. And obviously, like I take you and you're on the show because you are probably a bit further down the adoption curve than I guess most of the companies that are still trying. Like, what is your kind of perception of like how far down the shift most companies
Yeah,
are?
I definitely think that I live in a bubble because I think naturally, when you are wanting to adopt AI and you're trying to push the barriers around what you can and can't do and what to do with it, I think, yeah, you start living in this AI bubble, is what I would call it. My CEO actually shared with me a very interesting article about this at the moment, which is there is this AI legal tech bubble, and some of us live in it and some of us don't. But yeah, so a lot of the people that I tend to speak to are on the adoption curve, I guess a bit
Hmm.
more than others, but it's not lost on me. And like many of us, I attend conferences, and yes, you do get to speak to a lot of people. And so I think there's definitely two or three camps, right? I think there's people that are still wary of it, maybe don't understand it as much, and sort of closing themselves off to it and sort of waiting to see what others are going to do before they make a decision. So I think there's definitely that camp, and I've interacted with a lot of people in that camp. I think there's another camp of let's throw everything at it; it will solve everything. Um, which I don't think I'm in. So I think there is that camp, and then I think there's a in the middle camp, which is yeah, it will solve some things, it will not solve everything. Let's really think about what it can help us, how it will help us. A sort of more considered sort of approach, because I don't think it's all or nothing. I think it has to be something in the middle, and then I think it's yeah, how do people then get on that journey? And I think for all the stuff that we discussed before, I think, yeah, people just need to break it down, start small, play with it, learn about it, test it, and hopefully that can get them adopting.
And from the first season, we had a lot of kind of entrepreneurs and like startup founders who were building solutions for various industries. And for all of them who are kind of thinking about legal tech kind of area, right? And they're evaluating whether to create solutions for internal like legal ops or for like outside kind of counsel firms. What are the like the problems that you personally you'd be like, guys, build that. If you build that, come talk to me in the future. What can you tell to all of those like starting entrepreneurs, founders who are there to help build for that future that you're envisioning?
This is like my Christmas list. I love it.
Listening.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I've never seen do very well, and maybe not done at all, is the ability for any legal tool to truly show to the business the value that the legal team is bringing to the business. So let me explain what I mean. Um, Legal is often seen as a cost center, and often it's the data coming out of legal teams is how many contracts have you reviewed? How many headcount do you have? How much have you spent with external legal counsel? That doesn't tell the story, right? Because if you think about how legal team are being used today as true business partners, business advisors, there's a lot of other metrics that could and should be used to tell that story. And I think for me, the most frustrating part is when I show up to one of our leadership meetings or our quarterly business reviews, you have your chief commercial officer, your CTO, your CPO. They come in with data packs this big, right? Because they can measure everything from what their team does throughput, productivity. Now even in our sales team, we have recordings of the calls that our
Hmm.
salespeople have with their customers, so we can analyze all kinds of metrics. And then I show up with, yeah, this is my headcount. This is the number of matters I've worked on. This is the amount of spend on external legal spend. It doesn't stack up, right? Like,
Yeah.
because also, I might not be taken as seriously. I want to be able to talk, well, hey, based on everything that we do, this is how we've helped drive the launch of this new product. This is how we've helped grow revenue. This is how we've helped save costs. This is how we've helped, do X, Y, and Z. Because there isn't a tool that can do that. Some tools can help you report and how quickly you've helped close a contract. Great. But what does that mean? What does that mean for the business? If the business had a slow year and, legal is celebrating that we've closed more contracts than ever, well, great. But if your contract value has dropped by 30% and your business has not hit its numbers, so what if you've closed 10,000 contracts more than last year? Like, who cares? So I think it's something that helps connect the current legal tools to the rest of the company tech stack in some ways, but also that is able to tell that story and really put a number on value and ROI, and measuring and quantifying that. I think if someone was able to build that, I think I'd definitely be a client.
Ooh, that's a good idea for anyone listening.
Challenge.
Make sure to take it as a challenge for your own startup department for the innovation labs.
There we go.
And I was also wanting to start like a new tradition for the show where which I'm kind of borrowing from maybe the other shows. As what is the one question that you think would be good to ask for the next guest?
Ooh, my initial instinct is to ask more questions because I'm a lawyer. Who is the guest? What is the topic about? Yeah, obviously I know what the topic of the podcast is, but maybe something about themselves. Maybe something, when we talk about those things that are uniquely human, because again, I think ultimately business is about people. So I think, getting people to share a bit more about them, about their story, their experience, what personal challenges they face. I think and ultimately, hopefully, humanizes all of us because we're all humans. We're all trying to strive for the same thing. It just happens that some of us have different jobs and different titles, but so I think maybe a more human question.
I really like that because that's precisely what I try to bring out the most in the podcast, is to show the real stories, because we all live in all of this LinkedIn hypes and celebrations all the time, but not many people talk about the real stories, and that's the place where we connect. Because
100%.
For all of the episodes, everyone says the same thing. Like, the closer you get to the edges of the technology, of adoption, advancements, the more you feel like you're behind. And when you start talking to other people, everybody feels like they're behind. You talk to people in Anthropic, and they tell you oh, dude, we feel like we're behind. We should be moving faster.
Yeah.
And it can't be true for us to all be behind, right?
And it's also, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. That's a huge, it's a huge weight to have to carry, to always think that you're not good enough behind. I'm being super hypocritical here because I always tell my team I'd like us to be 2-3 months faster than what we're doing now. But it's I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and I think sometimes we take all of it a bit too seriously, and we forget what it's really about.
Yeah, and I agree to that. And for anyone listening, if you see Xavier's level, that is something to aspire to. That is already a really cool level of understanding, implementing, and being able to kind of envision those technologies within your workflows. So don't expect that you need to be, I don't know, like the CTO of Anthropic kind of level of understanding, like orchestrations between agents. There is time for everything. The adoption takes time, and we're on a journey. Xavier, thank you so much for joining me today for the episode. I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I've truly enjoyed it. I've learned a lot myself, and I think our listeners are going to take a lot of interesting insights for themselves from the conversation.
Oh, I really appreciate it, Jamil. Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always nice to speak to people that are passionate about the same topics and have a point of view as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure, man. That's a pod.